What's going on, guys? TKD 1 2 What's going on, guys? TKD 1 2 get back video, and today we're going to discuss another album this week that we reviewed. Of course, you all know on the channel here every single Saturday and Sunday now lately, but mostly on Sundays, I review a album of the week that we listen to all together. I tweet out on Monday, and we proceed throughout the week listening to this awesome album, and we review it at the end of the week. So this week I picked an artist that I wasn't really well aware of, you know, in terms of songs and music, everything, and projects, but I've heard a ton about lately, and this guy has proven himself definitely with this album, and we are going over none other than Daniel Caesar's Freudian. Now, going over the logistics of the album, it is 10 songs and 45 minutes long, so just kind of in that in-between range of being halfway an EP, halfway an album. In my first listen through the entire album, I found the album like to feel a little bit long, but then as I listen to it more and more, it definitely does feel a little bit more like 45 minutes. So definitely is a kind of a nice digestible album that you can get through in a few back and forth trips to work or something like that. And in terms of features, there is not a lot to discuss here because these features are not really that big or that, you know, that groundbreaking, I would say. There's an artist here called Kali Uchis, I believe how you pronounce it. And there's H.E.R., Sid, and Charlotte Day Wilson as well. So definitely there are, you know, they're all pretty good features, but they, you know, I will say are not very that memorable from a song-to-song basis, and like especially going, you know, out of the album, they really do kind of don't hold up. You know, there are some that are better than others, but for the most part, you know, the main focal point of this album is not the features at all, and that's not a bad thing at all. Now, you know, accompanying the title of this album being Freudian, and then having the artwork of, you know, Daniel scaling this giant metal structure that's been tipped over of some sort, you know, I really did get excited about this project because, like, man, like, it's so abstract, it's, like, it looks so intriguing as well. Like, I definitely do want to know more about the narrative in this whole entire album that he will be talking about and everything, and it definitely did intrigue me to go and listen to this album as well. And I will say, you know, in a market of R&B that feels saturated, right, like, where like we have so many different avenues of R&B when it comes to terms of SZA, Jhené Aiko, Elijah Blake, even Drake's R&B, The Weeknd, like there are so many different avenues of R&B that, you know, it kind of feels like, you know, there really is a difficulty in finding your own footing in R&B. However, Daniel Caesar has carved that for himself. There are, you know, only words I can, you know, really that are just random that I can really describe this album as, right? And I feel like if you listen to this album and if you come back to this review, you will understand what I'm saying here. This album feels so deep, feels so refreshing, feels so real. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is gonna sound extremely weird, guys, right? Just kind of hear me out on this little tyrant, right? So this album feels as if I was literally Daniel Caesar, right? He takes me on this emotional, this very revealing, very raw, very gritty, and very powerful journey through his emotions and his thoughts, right? And what's going on. And there's a lot of, you know, relationships of that is dealt with a lot in this album. And to a degree, when I first started listening to this album, I did find it a bit repetitive, how it was always about, you know, her or she or this another female adjective that you know, was always kind of the way that the songs were organized and, you know, sang to a way. So definitely did feel like, you know, that was a little bit too much, but after, you know, really spending a lot of time on this album, I thoroughly enjoyed it. I thoroughly enjoyed this album. This album has depth. This album is something that I feel, you know, is a risk, especially a risk for a new artist, and it's definitely a risk that pays off, and the risk entailing that, you know, I feel Daniel Caesar laid out a lot of his insecurities, a lot of his pain, a lot of his remorse, a lot of what he's gone through in life out on this album, right? On this album, Freudian. And for this type of album to be someone's debut album is extremely riskful, and just in a way that, you know, if you're a little bit too personal, that might turn a lot of people off. If you're not as, you know, hip to the modern day sound, or as a lot like other artists in R&B, you know, a lot of people might not enjoy it. But also, in contrary, this could also, you know, have a risk involved where it could pay off, where, you know, you have people that understand what you're saying, a lot of people are intrigued by what you're saying, and over here this album intrigued me and definitely did the better side of the risk. And just another word to describe this album, I would say, is definitely beautiful, just because mainly a song called New Roses, aka Transgressor's song, and that track, there is a, you know, segment in there where it's a cappella. It's about the first half of the song, and it is some of the most beautiful vocals I've heard a cappella wise in a long time. Like this, hearing this live, I'm sure it would bring a lot of people to tears. Like this album, you know, especially with that part specifically, is so beautiful in so many ways. You know what I'm saying? Like, man, it's gotta only like me saying beautiful, dog. Like this album is good, trust me, believe me, dog. There's also a lot of just really catchy, you know, songs in this whole thing, but they're not catchy in the sense of like upbeat, but they're catchy in the sense of it just lays hooks into you. Like you can relate to what Daniel's trying to portray here, and especially with We Find Love. Of course, that was released I believe prematurely at this album. I didn't listen to it at all, but you know, I like heard it a little bit from like my little brother's room and stuff like that. But We Find Love is it's like such a sad song. You know what I'm saying? Like it's a sad song, but at the same time it's uplifting. It's such a weird thing. Like I feel like this happens a lot in this album, where like you have songs and you have parts of this album that are very conflicting in the manner of you don't know whether to be sad or to feel hope and to feel like, you know, you're being uplifted in a way. It's a very weird thing. It's a thing that I haven't experienced in a long time with this album, with maybe things like The Weeknd's, where, you know, back in his old album and stuff like that, he would have two conflicting type of notions in the same song, similar to stuff in like Starboy and everything. But with this, you know, I feel that same thing as well, where there are two conflicting things that should not coexist, but they are. And like another example of just a really endearing, nice song is, of course, Best Part. That one is like, man, like that's like a wedding song for real. Like if you, man, like if you don't hear in the next 5 years someone use that as their like first dance, I don't know what we're doing, because that song is just a perfect couple song to really, you know, dance to at a wedding or whatever. And then, you know, while the ending of the album, the self-titled Freudian track, you know, is a bit ambiguous, a bit vague in a lot of ways, and, you know, to a degree, there are some lines in there that really do sound like a very sharp opposite to what the entire album is kind of portraying, but it really does open the sense of like, I want to hear more. You know what I'm saying? It definitely has that like open-endedness where it's like, man, like I would love to have another Daniel Caesar track, you know, or album at that, to really digest what has happened, you know, in this album, right? So overall, man, like the outro was good, the overall tone of this album is good, and, you know, to really sum it up as a thesis, this album is just beautiful, you know, and in a lot of ways, I'm sure there are plenty of different things that you can find that you will enjoy on Daniel Caesar's album, and this really does show that this singer from Toronto really does have a place here in the industry, and really does have a place, you know, in your guys' devices and on your streaming services. So that was my review of Daniel Caesar's Freudian. If you enjoyed, make sure to leave a like, subscribe, and shine down below. Appreciate you. Thanks for watching, and as always, I got you.